I've experienced a lot of anger in my life. Anger has been a huge part of my journey. When I was young, I was extremely angry all the time. And in more recent years, on my spiritual journey, there's been a deep question, a deep consideration about the role of anger in the spiritual process. And there are many people in various forms of spirituality who seem to look down on anger, or see anger as somehow unspiritual, that anger is somehow something that we should avoid. And as a culture, we are awakening to the fact that we have been suppressing our emotions collectively for a long time, particularly as men. We are taught not to express our emotions. And this is starting to shift. People are opening up to grief work. People are opening up to trauma healing. People are recognizing that crying and expressing our emotions is an essential and important part of healing and wholeness. And that if we don't express those emotions, then we store those emotions inside of us, and they can even make us sick. They can manifest in various musculoskeletal disorders or chronic diseases, chronic issues. Um, and we're starting to wake up to this. We're starting to realize this. And there's an embracing of our emotions happening, which is so exciting and so beautiful. But for some reason, anger is rarely included on that list. We're starting to embrace sadness. We're starting to embrace grief. And we're starting to embrace these kinds of emotions. But we're not talking about anger. And for me, having a natural capacity to experience high levels of anger, this has been very difficult for me. And for much of this process, I have judged myself. I have had shame around my anger. I've had guilt around my anger. I've seen my anger as an impediment to my spiritual growth. And I've had these inner dialogues that say things like, "Oh man, why do I keep looking at this? It makes me angry. Why can't I just get along with these people? It makes me angry. Uh, I'm not doing my work. I'm not living my truth. I'm not living my purpose as a spiritual person because I'm still feeling anger." And I want to call BS on this because I believe anger actually has a profound, important role to play in the spiritual journey. Sometimes we talk about anger as an emotion that covers up other emotions. We talk about it as an emotion that covers up sadness and pain, that it's a reaction to that pain. And therefore, we can acknowledge anger, but we need to move past it quickly and get to the underlying pain. This too doesn't feel good to me. Anger itself has value. Anger drives us to act. Anger is the emotion that causes a mother bear to protect her young, right? This is a deeply meaningful, important emotion, but it's very uncomfortable. And most people really don't like feeling anger. I don't like feeling anger. My whole body contracts. This morning I got up and something set me off, and I started feeling lots of anger, and my heart started racing, and I could feel the cortisol and the adrenaline dump into my bloodstream, and I was I was just totally alone, just thinking about things, and I felt like I was gonna punch someone. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel good to be angry, but there is wisdom in this. There is truth in this feeling that we're experiencing. And over the past couple of years, in particularly, there's been a lot of reasons to be angry, and a lot of people have been angry. And I hear all kinds of spiritual friends say things like, "Oh, why are people so angry with each other? Why is there so much conflict? Why can't we just get over the conflict?" And one of my favorite spiritual teachers, a man named Martin Prechtel, I was watching one of his lectures once, and he said something along the lines of, Violence is not the presence of conflict. Violence is what happens when you don't have conflict. I want to repeat that. Violence is not the presence of conflict. Violence is what you get when you don't have any conflict. And what this means is that if we don't give our anger and our disagreements and our conflicts a container, a space to express themselves, then they will inevitably turn into violence. If two sides of the culture war, of the political debates, of the divide in the world right now, if the two sides aren't able to constructively express their anger, constructively navigate and explore their conflict, then the inevitable result is violence. And we've seen this. We've seen this over the past 2 years. It's been happening. There's expression of anger, but there's not a healthy container to express these conflicts. And this is where we have to learn to listen to each other. And I suggest that listening to each other starts with listening to ourselves and listening to our anger and giving our anger a place to reside within us and a container of acceptance within ourselves. If we can accept our anger and treat it as equal to all of these other emotions, all of these other parts of ourselves, each worthy of love, each worthy of being seen and heard by ourselves. If we can do that, then we can start to do that for others. And if we can start to do that for others, we can start to create a collective container for our conflict to be navigated in a constructive way. And if we can create a container for our conflict to be navigated in a constructive way, then we can prevent violence. And so I'm really working on honoring my anger. I'm really working on giving it a place to be heard within myself. And oftentimes I notice my compulsive patterns and my habits are feeding my anger. And I kept thinking, why am I doing that? Why am I feeding this? Why do I keep looking at things that make me angry? What if that's happening simply because my anger isn't feeling heard? The parts of myself that are angry don't feel heard. They don't feel received. They don't feel held. And so they keep coming up. They keep looking for food. My parts that are angry keep looking for food because they're not being heard, and their voice keeps getting louder. And the energy of that anger keeps getting more intense. And that's going to keep happening until one of two things occurs. One, that anger breaks out into some sort of external expression. Or that anger is heard and held and respected as a valuable voice within the council of my being. And so I just wanted to make this video because I think a lot of people are probably suffering from something like this. A lot of people are probably feeling something like this, especially after the past 2 years. There's been a lot of justifiable reasons to feel anger over the past 2 years. And I'm sure a lot of people have a voice of guilt and shame, and a voice that suppresses that anger because it doesn't feel good. And there's these stories that say it's not spiritual, it's not polite, it's not acceptable. But your anger is acceptable. Now, the outward expression of your anger can hurt people. And that's something we always need to be aware of. And we need to be careful with that. Part of that creating a container for our anger to be felt and to be seen and to be respected within ourselves and within our communities is learning to allow that anger to move while being in control of where it goes and where it's directed. Because if we don't gain that control over where it's directed, then it can hurt people. We can say things that we wouldn't say if we weren't angry. We can do things that we wouldn't do if we weren't angry. And this is not what we want. What we want is for our anger to be able to flow and to be seen and to be received within us and within the container of our community structures without causing harm to ourselves or others. And that's actually quite challenging. This is not something that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about grief work. If I just need to cry, I'm not at a risk of hurting anyone by crying, right? Maybe this is part of the reason why we suppress anger, and part of the reason why anger is the last emotion that the spiritual community is learning to embrace. And I found myself feeling anger at the people who aren't expressing their anger. I found myself getting very frustrated. I'll be angry about something that's going on in the world, and then the people around me will be ignoring it. They'll have their heads in their sand, and they'll be bypassing it in some way, trying not to look at what's going on. And then I'll get angry at them. It's like, why aren't you angry? Why aren't you angry? And I think it's because people are genuinely afraid of their anger. People are genuinely ashamed of their anger. People genuinely don't know how to feel anger and not run away from it. For me, running away from my anger has never been a choice. My anger has been there. It's been present. And it has not been possible for me to ignore it. It has not been possible for me to put it aside. And I've had to learn how to work with it. And I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out. That's why I'm making this video, right? I woke up this morning, experienced a lot of anger, and then noticed this shame and this judgment and this criticism of myself within myself about that feeling of anger. It's like, why are you doing that again? Why are you doing that again? You've got things to do today. You got chores to complete. You got work to do. And you're over here feeling like you're going to punch someone in a room by yourself. This is not constructive, right? These are the stories that come in, but maybe it is constructive. Maybe we can steer that anger and that energy towards something. This morning, I steered it towards this video. And I already feel a lot better. And in order to direct that anger, I didn't even need to directly discuss any of the things that were making me angry. It's probably a different video, maybe a whole different channel. But we can harness anger. We can diffuse anger. We can direct anger. And we can find wholeness with our anger. We can love our anger. We can honor our anger. I'm feeling a little bit of anger about the traffic noise. And I just accept myself for feeling frustration and anger about the traffic noise. Right? It doesn't have to be suppressed in order to be moved, in order to be resolved. It doesn't have to be suppressed. In fact, I think suppressing anger makes us very sick. It makes us very, very sick. And maybe some people, anger is just naturally not a part of their disposition. And that's fine. That's fine. For people like me, fiery, passionate people like myself who experience a lot of anger, we've got to learn to work with it. It's one of the things that stopped me from making videos in recent years, because I had a hard time talking about anything without feeling anger, because anger was such an omnipresent part of my experience. And I realized that maybe that wasn't the best way of dealing with it. I was dealing with my anger. I was suppressing it through my addictive patterns, smoking and indulging on screen time. This is not healthy. This is not healthy. Is the temporary discomfort of feeling anger, the temporary discomfort of facing conflict with someone, really worse than the long-term consequences of suppressing that anger, having that suppressed anger turn into addiction, turn into sickness, turn into muscular contraction, turn into high blood pressure and high cortisol levels? Is this really better than the temporary short-term experience of conflict within ourselves or within our community? Is that really better? I don't think it is. I think anger is just like sadness or grief. It needs to be felt, it needs to be acknowledged, and it can't be bypassed. And if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't learn to work with it, it will either stay inside us, buried deep down, manifesting in various imbalances, or it will seek compulsive consumption of things that feed it. Compulsive consumption of things that feed the anger, keep it on the surface, and it keeps saying, I'm here, are you going to listen to me now? I'm still here. Just like sadness. I wrote down a definition of depression the other day. I was talking to someone about their depression and my experience with depression. And the definition was something like, depression is the chronic, persistent sadness that occurs when we label our emotional experience a pathology. And I think the same fundamental truth occurs with anger. That if we see our anger as a pathology or a problem, if we label it as bad or wrong, if we label it as something that we should feel guilty about, something that's unspiritual, then we can't even begin to develop a healthy relationship with our anger. We can't even begin to learn the lessons it's trying to teach us. We can't even begin to direct it towards action that might serve us and serve others. Anger is beautiful. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. It has the potential to clear people out of our lives that are no longer really compatible with us, and that can be painful and uncomfortable as well. But it is part of who we are as divine beings incarnate on this planet. And can you imagine a world without anger? I mean, a lot of people like to visualize a utopian, spiritual, enlightened, global new earth. And they say things like, they kind of envision this just world of 8 billion enlightened monks walking around not having any heightened expression of emotion. And I think this is kind of silly. I don't envision a spiritual global utopia that is void of anger. I envision one where people are in touch with their anger and they honor their anger and they know how to work with it and direct it for healing and for justice and for the greater good. I hope that landed for some people and resonated for some people. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.